Friends, family, fellow students, administration, honored guests, esteemed instructors. It is my distinct honor to represent the night class of 2007 as its spokesperson here at graduation. I can recall a particularly long night after which Instructor Matera suggested Sal Arrigo be the class representative. Sal told him that it should be me, to which Instructor Matera replied somewhat derogatorily, "Willis is the kind of guy that wants to do this." At the time, I deflected his statement saying I did not, but that was as untrue then as it is today. I am the kind of guy who wants to do this, and I am proud to have been chosen to say a few words. Ah, yes, a few words. It was suggested by several instructors that this speech would be judged mostly by its brevity, and the shorter it was, the better it would be. Short and sweet, Willis, I was told. I have heeded that advice, but for the record, there is very little that is sweet about me, and certainly nothing that is short. Now I must first apologize in advance to those of you here tonight who are not in the know. There will be some inside jokes and yes, some impressions that will not make sense to you. I would ask that you simply laugh when others laugh. And please keep in mind that this will all be over soon, and you will be home in time to watch the end of the Broncos-Texans game. At the nascent, oh, excuse me, first of all, I would just like to say that it's good to see Curtis Giannett here tonight. After all, it is a Thursday, and as we all came to know well over the semester, Giannett only paid for Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Wednesdays, and alternate Saturdays. So thank you, Curtis, for making this exception. Thank you, Curtis. At the nascent beginnings of this speech's creation, I traveled all the way back in my mind to the mandatory meeting in May, where our classroom was overfilled with more than 70, now I hear 120 potential applicants, to the agility test in June, which pared that number down to 30, and finally to the 23 of us who sit here today, graduates of the SCTI Fire Academy. What will be the stories from fire school that we will all tell our friends and loved ones? When we cross one another's paths as we move through our careers, what will be the moments that we will recount? They are too numerous to mention in our limited time here tonight, but I ask you. Will we say, hey, remember the time we jacked Gilbert's car up on the ground and watched him nearly cry? Undoubtedly. We might also say, remember Horniman? Who? You know, the blonde homeschooled guy whose business was saving lives. Oh yes, or who was that guy with the porn mustache who stoically shouted orders while looking at you sideways? Williams. Williams. And when recalling the most awesome tattoos gotten by fellow students, we will surely have to remember Sal Arrigo getting Italian stallion down the back of his left and right arm. Crazy, you say? Certainly not for a man who lives his life 1/4 mile at a time. We might also ask one another, who was the guy who turned the siren on in the rescue? That's the week before graduation. I can't remember. He was a really old guy who spoke with a lisp, had a tiny forehead, and ate cereal bars. Willis! I told you, just laugh when others do. There are so many memories attached to each student. Sadly, there simply isn't enough time tonight to recount them all. I decided to seek out advice from the instructors for this speech's preparation. I contacted each one individually and took copious notes of our conversations. The first person I called was T.J. Rhodes. I asked him if he had any thoughts on this speech. How would he do it? I got an odd response. Willis, I can hardly stand it. Did you know that I am a hazmat expert? And oh, by the way, I am awesome. And I go to Brazil every year, and no, that's not a dip in my lip. It was awkward. I visited Lieutenant Matera in person. This turned out to be an enormous mistake. I asked him about his recollections of smoke and burn down. He immediately began projectile vomiting uncontrollably. Thankfully, it was mostly water, but my favorite polo shirt was ruined, and I was no closer to this speech's completion. Next up was instructor Mark Calderini. I asked him a specific question about the honored guests that would be in attendance. He pulled me in close and responded with, Willis, a couple of things. The speech as you currently have it written is a disaster. You'd be on your way to Ocala, but hey. Just work on your syntax and your sentence structure and you should be okay, all right? Okay, all right? No help. Undaunted, I moved on to Instructor Hope. I called and called and called, but got no answer. So I moved on to Lieutenant Jerry Jensen. I met with him in person at Station 8, and I knew I could count on his assistance with the introduction of this speech. I could not have been more wrong. He came at me like a rabid wolverine holding hydraulic shears, shouting, Willis, what did I tell you about that siren? I jumped in my car and I drove off. It's so nice to see the lieutenant here tonight. I couldn't meet with Mike Bussell that night because he and Lieutenant Jensen worked the same shift. But I was anxious to get his input. He agreed to meet with me at Toys R Us, where he was buying the latest Matchbox cars to add to his collection. I encouraged him to give me some suggestions about my speech's tone and concept. I remember his crazy idea. Willis, what you want to do is constantly move your arms side to side in chopper motion. Then make sure to suggest that when everyone gets home, they keep their cat. Odd advice from a fascinating little man. When I was finally able to reach Ron Evans, or Little Coaster, I was obviously frustrated. I hoped that he would have some pearls of wisdom for me. He said, do what I do, Willis. Watch Coaster and then magnify whatever he's doing. If he's calm, be a teddy bear. If he's angry, go nuclear. He then went, blah, 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 and exploded into flames. I detected the strong smell of sulfur after he was gone. I had high hopes for Lieutenant Coaster. Throughout the semester, it became obvious that he cared deeply about all of us. I remember during Rescue Drags and Carries Day when he reminded us that we could take our gear off and head across the street to Wendy's because they were hiring. And none of us will ever forget how patiently he worked with us during company evolutions. We all knew if you have a question, ask Coaster. He's here to guide us. So you can imagine my surprise at his draconian response when I asked him what he thought about my speech. He looked me in the eye and said in an ever-increasing tone, and I took notes because I wanted to make sure I got this correct. Willis, it's clear that you were given an opportunity here to represent your class. But what you've clearly done is use the time to lampoon dig dog instructors and other filth-flaring classmates. You're a gosh darn disgrace to the academy, and I'm flip-flop embarrassed to be dadgum associated with you. Now drop and give me 20, and if you want to call Bobby Lamb, it's Coaster, K-O-C-U-R. Needless to say, he left me in tears. So my last hope was Lieutenant Byrd. Lieutenant Byrd is so busy. How busy is he? Lieutenant Byrd is so busy that I had to meet with him way out east in Mayaca, where he was simultaneously working on a diesel engine and hunting wild boar. When we got a moment to talk, I asked him for his thoughts on our class.